excited to be here, everybody. I quite enjoy these online functions because it just logistically it's easier for life than it is commuting and setting up a room. So here we are, we're going to make this work, and you can hopefully then take it to your next presentation or meeting that's you have coming up next week. But to start off, what I really want you to remember is that you can make an impact. Even online, you can come across as impactful, memorable, and authentic. So we're going to go through some tips and skills on how to work on your impact, your executive presence, and even calming your nerves. I'll talk for 40, 45 minutes, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. But don't put your feet up because you get to participate, okay? There's lots of ways for you to interact. In fact, I'm going to start with one. There's a question I want you to think about. Imagine back, might be several months ago, to where you saw a presentation in person and thought that was great. What was great about it? Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so put in the chat. All right, chat button. Has everybody found their chat button? On my screen, it'll be different because I'm sharing a screen. So in the chat, put in what was great about that presentation that you saw. All right, engaging, interactive, energy and presence, clarity, fun, smile, that is key. Energy, articulate, pointed. Inclusion, right? I like that. Authentic. Digestible, so the content was really good. Aware of the audience, authentic, personable, with stories. I love these. And all of them are absolutely relevant and important. Now, I'm going to ask you one more question. This is a temperature check. We're going to use the annotate button here. And I would just like you to get to know your comfort level if you had to deliver an online presentation now. So make an X or an O or a squiggle. Now, to find the annotate, it varies on screens, on if you're on an iPad or a screen, but if you're on a desktop, if you haven't found it yet, at the top under View Options, click that, go down about the 7th option, click Annotate, and then you can make a squiggle or a circle or a heart. X, okay, keep going, we can fill this up. Great, oh, some people are very confident, some are not so much. And some haven't found the annotate button, but we've got most of you, so that's great. Wonderful. And I'm going to clear so that I can go on to the next one. Okay, so thank you for that. We have a pulse of what really makes a great presentation and where we all are on giving them. So when preparing for an online presentation, there's 3 areas of mindset that I really like to emphasize. The first one is that if you have to present online, do it with no apologies and no limits. Okay, it may not be perfect, but you can make it great. Online, you can still make an impact, you can still connect with the audience, and it's better than just a phone call. And there's no limits. Think with no limits, thinking outside the box. Okay, yes, I'm in this box, but we're not limited by conference room size. venue budget, travel budget, catering capacity, any of that. We can create something as big or as small or as interactive as we need it to be. So that's our mindset. No limits, no apologies. We're going to make it great, whatever we have to do. All right. The other one, the other mindset that's really important, first from the start, when you start creating it, is audience first. We're going to tailor our delivery and our content to our listeners. And the third mindset that I find really important is to be authentic. We want you to come across as your own natural, authentic you, whether it's in person or on a screen, in a big group or in a small group. It's still you. So we want you to be natural. So how can we be authentic when we're delivering in a space like this? Okay, so let's think about what makes a speaker come across as authentic, whether it's in person or not. So I'm going to share my screen again, and I want some feedback. Make a little tick or squiggle using the annotate button on which of those you think are really important for a speaker to come across as authentic. Okay, so our choices are eye contact, smile, pace, content, yep, content relevant, voice, posture. And if there's something that you think is glaringly missing, feel free to write it in the chat. Or you can write it on the screen if you're good at that, but I'm not. No more, okay. But if you, probably the chat would be better because it's kind of hard, difficult handwriting using annotate. I think that says not robotic, and I agree with that. So we will talk about that. Tone, okay? The tone of the talk. Right, these are, that's really good feedback. But it looks like every one of those that I listed, several people agree that that's really important, including eye contact and content are circled and squiggled many times. Okay, great. I have to clear that or it'll mess up my next one. All right, so to be authentic. The first one that was mentioned a lot and circled was eye contact. And this is important to keep in mind when you're presenting, because to make eye contact when you're meeting somebody in a conversation is easy because we look in their eyes. To create eye contact on an online presentation, you have to look at the camera, the little circle with no eyes or smile or anything next to it. So it does require deliberate effort. If you find yourself, as is really common, you know, staring at your picture down in the corner, does anybody else do that? Or looking at your notes, which might be at the bottom, or looking at everyone's picture, which is nice to do because I like to see that you're all smiling and you're there. But for them to see you looking at them, you need to look at the little camera, right? And that requires deliberate effort. And it requires practice because it doesn't feel natural, but it comes across as natural to our listeners. So this is where we're going to transfer what is authentic in conversation to being deliberate online and looking natural but feeling awkward. So we have to overcome that. And we get to smile at the camera, right? You're smiling at this little thing at the top and there's nobody there, but we smile. And that's important to practice and do deliberately and get used to it. Okay, the next one is pace. Pace is important to adjust for online delivery. In a conversation, things can go fast and there's back and forth, and that's okay, but people are interacting and giving feedback. And they adjust the pace on how that conversation's going. But if you're online, you need to be very careful that your voice and video keep up with each other. Because if there's a glitch or the video doesn't transfer through the lines as fast, then things don't match. So it's very important to pause more often, deliberately. And it makes it easier to do that by using shorter sentences. So when presenting, when creating your content, create it in phrases and short sentences to make it easy to pause at the end of each idea. This also feels natural to your listeners because they have time to think. That feels conversational. It may feel unnatural to you to have to deliberately pause after saying something, but to the listeners, it's absolutely natural because that's what they're listening to every day in conversation. But the words in between have at a natural rate. Oftentimes when people say you need to slow down, they're saying that they're meaning the wrong thing. We do not want to slow down the rate of words because we do not want to sound like a robot, right? So, rate of words is natural. Pause deliberately more often than you would in other situations because it's online. You want the audience to keep up with you. This is hard to do if nervous. When we're nervous, we tend to speed up. We don't want to do eye contact, particularly at a little camera. We want to just race through or look down. So this will take some practice. And there's a very good tip coming up on how to combat this under the topic I like to call executive presence. Executive presence is how you come across. And when you're delivering online, it's even more important to control your executive presence. The one that I think is really important for everybody, but particularly women who, when they're nervous, is voice. Voice can often get sort of weak and stuck in our throat, or it gets sort of stuck in our nasal, sinuses, and we're talking and it stays up here and it's hard to listen to, or we go squeaky. And all of that can be so easily remedied by a totally natural technique that I call breathe. We do it every day, but it's so easy to forget to take a proper breath when we're presenting. So it's important to do this. And singers know this. On the reactions button down at the bottom, you can give thumbs up or clap. Put a thumbs up if you ever sung in a choir or in a group. Yes, we have a few. Yes, we got thumbs up. Yep, there we go. All right. So you choir members or singers know that breath is so important. And where do you breathe from? Can somebody please write it in the chat for me? Where do we breathe from choir members? The diaphragm, exactly. So it's important when you're singing. It's also important when you're presenting, particularly if you're nervous. All right, so I'm going to have you practice that. We're going to do a little navel gazing, quite literally. So in a minute, we will stand up, and what I want you to do with your fingers is cross them like this. So they're lightly crossed, whereas we can pull our hands apart and push them back together very easily, okay? So if you don't mind, if you're comfortable turning your video back on and doing this with us, that's great. If you're in pajama pants or yoga pants, there's no judgment, okay? So everybody stand up, whether you're showing us or not, okay? So put your fingers lightly crossed over your tummy, okay? And then I want you to take a deep breath in, and as you breathe in, your tummy goes out and your hands come apart. So breath in, and then push your breath out. Now so have your air push your tummy, not forcing it. Breath in, breath out, and our tummy is pushing our air. Well, the tummy's pushing the air out, and that's what makes our hands go back together. So that is where you breathe from when you're presenting, even online. Okay, so it's important to practice that before your presentation, that you're taking deep breaths in and you're pushing out. You're not breathing from here and pushing out and then it gets stuck here. You're breathing from down below and pushing out, and then your voice projects and you sound confident and you then are less nervous, because taking that breath helps calm our nerves. And if you're nervous before you start, make sure you take a few deep breaths. And if you find as you're talking that your voice is shaking, maybe you're talking a little bit too fast, just stop, take a breath, not to your chest, but to your tummy. Take a second one if you're really nervous and you need to, and then you can carry on. That number one tip of that's so natural but so hard to remember, of taking a breath, helps us in so many ways. All right, the other thing on executive presence to think about and control, because you are in control even though you're online, is to frame our shot. Okay, this is our camera shot. So set it up so that it's flattering to you, with your camera level pretty close to eye level. It can be a little lower so it's angled slightly, but what you don't want is to have it so low that people look up your nose. And I saw that just last week. People haven't quite figured out this Zoom thing, so I thought I should mention it anyway. And you also want to be careful. You don't want it angled so that there's a ceiling light in it. And I see this all the time too. So frame your shot. Have a good look at make sure that you're seated in a place with good light, not backlight. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just take a few minutes before you start. The light is decent. The camera angle helps me be straight on, helps my eye contact. And the background, make sure your background's not cluttered. You can use one of these digital backgrounds if you want, but you don't have to. We don't want this to be complicated. Just make it so that there's nothing in your background that's distracting. Also, whatever you're wearing, I recommend solid colors. Other people have other ideas, but I think we want something that doesn't distract, right? So don't wear floral patterns and fun jewelry that would be great at a cocktail party for somebody to come up and say, I love your necklace, where'd you get it? But when you're giving a presentation, you don't want anything to distract from your message and your delivery. And your posture. In executive presence, posture is really important. It's good to sit nice and straight on the front half of the chair. If you slouch, first of all, if you lean back, you slouch, then you can't breathe from your diaphragm, then your voice will get stuck here and you don't project, which makes your energy level lower. So if you're sitting up, you can breathe, you have energy. It also, having that breath and feeling in a way that you have energy adds to the energy and enthusiasm of your talk. So pay attention to your posture. If you're sitting and I saw this just the other day, if you're sitting in a chair that spins, don't swivel while you're talking. It's so easy to do because we don't think about it. So make sure you're sitting in a stationary chair while you're presenting. If you're in one of these long meetings where there's lots of people talking, go ahead, slouch, spin. It's, people are relaxed, but you're presenting, you need to control what's in your shot. So with your sound, it's important. This is one thing that's very important to think about ahead of time and to test it. If the sound on your computer is not great, I like to use a headset. It then minimizes any other background noise. So test it ahead of time. Most people have headsets nowadays, but it's worth mentioning just to test it. So with that sort of delivery, thoughtful delivery, and an executive presence, that helps you to look and sound confident and professional, and you're connecting to your audience. And your audience feels like you're connecting to them, you're speaking to them, and that makes it easy to listen to. And therefore, it's memorable and more impactful. Let's now look at your message, how we craft the content of your message. So going back to the mindsets that I mentioned earlier, audience first and authentic to you. So how can you be authentic and audience first at the same time? My mindset on that is to think of it as that your message is your gift. If you were giving a gift to a close friend who's having a special birthday, you will put thought into what you want to give them, what they would appreciate, what they would like, what would be relevant, and you would deliver it to them in a way that they get it. You wouldn't just, throw it across the room, or, you would make sure that they get it and that it's received with the grace that you've prepared for it. So that's the mindset of a message. You're thinking of your audience, you craft it in a way that's relevant to them, that's in a way that they will get it. I got a little round of applause with that. Thank you. So the important concept now when we're starting to prepare the content, now that we've really been clear on our intention, is to simplify it. Particularly for an online delivery, it's important to simplify your message. Less is more. The less you say, the more your audience will remember. So our aim really is to increase understanding, not to give all the detail. Okay, if the detail is left out and somebody thinks it's important, they will ask questions, which is good because that increases the interaction. And the message needs to be clear. And it's very important before you even start to turn on your computer or create slides or anything like that, is to give yourself time to brainstorm on what is your message? What's your main message? And I often get people to reply to me, well, I don't really have a main message. It's just a briefing or an update or an overview. Oh, that sounds so boring. Nobody will remember it the next day if it's boring. So think of it this way. If you give this presentation and a few days later, a mutual friend who was not at the presentation runs into one of your participants and says, hey, how was her presentation? And they'll say, it was fabulous. Okay, what did she say? What do you want that to be? If they remember one thing out of your 20 or 30-minute talk, what do you want it to be? That's probably your main message. So think about that. What's the one thing they should take away? What are the 2 or 3 key supporting points to bring that home? And then start brainstorm. Then you can finish your brainstorming. So I like to brainstorm not on the computer. You can use scratch paper or Post-it notes or mind maps. There's all sorts of tools that I've used that I've seen other people use. But do all that brainstorming and the content and the decision-making first before you turn it on your computer. And then make your outline and your notes first. Slides will come last. So we're still in notes. Stay with me. When you prepare your notes, have large print and short phrases. So 3 to 5 words per line, printed nice and big. This will help you with your delivery. And then when you're building your presentation and your content, put some interaction in there. Try to have time about every 15 minutes for them to put something in the chat or to open it up for questions or have some kind of interaction. You want to keep them engaged because we want it still to feel like it's a conversation or a meeting in a conference room. When you ask the questions, whether it's on a slide or in for the chat, keep them really clear and short. Or if you give them questions or instructions, like write this in the chat, really keep it short and make sure it's clear. So if there's too many instructions or it goes on for a whole story, they might get confused. Okay, so we're going to bring this together. Bringing together, you have good notes and good delivery. How does that work? So what I like to do is I have my notes printed nice and big, and I have them propped next to my camera, either on my computer or on a stand next to my computer, to the left. That way I read the note, I can start to speak, I finish at the camera, finish my thought, pause, and remember what we do at the end of every breath? Breathe. So I take a breath and then I look back and start over. So having notes, that don't force, we don't want slides that we're looking down. We want our notes so that we can look at our notes. We know our message, we've got it in our head. We can then deliver to the camera, take our breath so our voice sounds natural, and then go back. This will help you stay on track. You won't get lost. And it also helps you look relaxed because there's no panicking. It's not, oh my gosh, where am I? Everything you need is right here. And because it's easy to then look at the camera and take a breath, you will feel more relaxed. And this helps your audience feel more connected. I'm going to show you a picture of what helped me do that. So this was my setup. I facilitated a meeting last week, and I put my computer on a few books so that the camera was closer to eye level, and the agenda was just to the left of that. It didn't cover the camera. So I could follow along, and it was very easy. I didn't get distracted. And then just to remind me, I've got this written on each side of my camera to remind me to breathe, to remind me to smile, because we like to remember that there's people out there on the other side of that camera. So you go, you've got my hack. So after you've prepared your notes, then you can think about your slides. You use your slides where in that spot they would help you to support or clarify part of your message. I want you to remember not to get too hung up on this because you are the main visual. You are the presenter. Your slides are not the presentation. You are, okay? They're just there to support you. So keep them simple, not too many words. We want to keep control of our audience. And if they're reading a whole paragraph on our slide, then they're not listening to us. So we want to keep control of their attention. So our slides just support us, not become the whole thing. So when you're using all of this different technology, whether you use Zoom or Teams or WebEx or FaceTime or however else, there's a lot of tools out there. So use them where it's relevant. But if you're using them to interact during a presentation, make sure you practice it. And make sure that you have somebody like Joni and Monica are here they're controlling the mute for me. But if I were doing a smaller group and hosting it, then I would be in control of the mute. It's good to make sure that people, if they come in, they're muted until you're ready to unmute them. Remember, you're in control of this space. However, it's nice, particularly at the end, if you can ask people to turn their video back on so we can see smiles and have a little interaction, then we know somebody's out there. But, only if people are uncomfortable with that and the internet is stable enough. So we have to let people have that choice. So we can use chat for the questions. We've already done that. That's very handy. And you can also build in your interaction using Annotate or polls or these reaction buttons that we use down at the bottom. All of them are great tools. Just make sure you practice them so that you're comfortable with where it looks not only on your computer, but where it will look on the other people's computer. Don't get too hung up on the technology. Really remember, they are there to hear and see you. If it were just about the technology or the slides or anything else, you can just email that to them, okay? So you're the presenter. If you don't get any of the other interactions to work, you can just do Q&A as needed. But just build in time in your presentation for interaction so that it feels like it's an interactive presentation that you could have in a conference room or a meeting. So your priority is that your delivery and your presence are confident and authentic, and your message is clear and memorable. That's what makes an impact. You being confident and memorable, your message being clear, that's impactful. And you can certainly do that even online. So I'd like to do another temperature check. If you were delivering an online presentation now, what would be your comfort level? 10 being totally, I got this. 1 being, I'm still petrified. Can you use the annotate button? Thank you. If somebody is having trouble finding the annotate button, just put your number into chat. Wonderful. We certainly have moved our numbers up dramatically from when we started. That makes me really happy. I'm just going to go back. I'm going to just clear those. I'm just going to go back to one thing. I want to go over this delivery part again, where we're bringing together notes and our delivery focused on our audience. Okay, so you look at your notes. You've already had your breath. You see what you need to say. You can start to speak and then finish off looking at the camera. Smile, pause, let them think, take a breath, and then go back. So it sounds so easy, and it actually is easy, but it does take practice. So I encourage you to practice. And don't forget to smile. So with that, we have time for questions. We actually have lots of time for questions. Actually, you know what? I'm going to share one more thing. I would love to connect with you or hear your comments or questions. This is my email address. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm the only Dana Sather Robinson on LinkedIn, so that'll be easy to find. And there's my website. So if you have questions, if you have comments, if you want to practice, if you're confused, please connect with me, because I'd love to find out what you have to say and to connect with you.
That's terrific. Oh, so
That
Dana, one of the questions that we had is, how important is smiling? People tend to look angry on video. So can you talk to us about that?
I think it has to going back to being authentic. And this is why I write my little smiley note up there, because I drew a smiley face, it makes me smile. If I were just being robotic and reading, these are the tech tools, and then looking at the camera and then smiling, it would be fake. So it does require some practice. It helps if, like, I can see your faces and I can see familiar faces, so it's easy to smile. Funnily enough, breath helps. If you've had a deep breath and then you are talking naturally, and there's energy, having had a deep breath and then delivering at a normal rate of speed with energy and using your hands and feeling like it's all very important and relevant, a smile feels natural. If you're being robotic about it, you're like, oh, I have to say this, and now I'll just say it, then it doesn't. So this is where the practice comes in on being able to deliver naturally and in a conversational style, your own conversational style. And for some people that includes more hand movements and more smiles. And for others, it's more serious. But it's a matter of being authentic.
So Dana, thank you. That's terrific. I know that it's so hard to look into the camera sometimes and remember that there are friendly people on the other side, you know, and so it is good to see friends. Someone else asked, how do you coach someone to throw out their slides and start with just a great presentation?
I think it's, see, in my generation, we always started without slides because we didn't have slides, right? And then PowerPoint came, and people, so many people now are used to just creating from PowerPoint. But it's really important to start without the slides, even if you're going to use slides. I've given and seen plenty of presentations that are slides from beginning to end, but they still support that message. When doing brainstorming, even if it's just writing something simple, have you ever noticed that if you start to type, right? You're in Word and you start to type, and then I go, oh, the fonts, I don't like this font. I changed the font. Like if I've copied something from the internet and I'm pasting it into Word because I'm gonna, you know, it's a recipe or whatever, right? I don't like that font. I don't like that color. I start changing things, and now I'm completely focused on something else, and my brain has lost track of what I was actually thinking about. What was the important part? So allow that brainstorming before the slides. Even if it's just a matter of making your outline on paper first. And I know it's really hard for a lot of people who try to use technology for everything, but even Post-it notes work. I laid this out with Post-it notes, right? Because the order was very difficult. So rather than reordering my notes, I laid out Post-it notes, stuck them on a wall, and reordered them. So even if it's just key ideas on a scrap of paper, until the order and the message is clear, that will help so much. It will actually save time. If you start with brainstorming to develop a clear message, then when you do sit down to write the notes and create the slides, that part goes fast. But if you open up your computer and you're looking at a slide and going, what should my heading be? Like how you don't know what your message is yet. So it will take much longer. So doing the brainstorming is time saving.
Terrific. So this is a great follow-up question because you just were using your hands a lot while you were talking just now. And somebody asked, what do you do with your hands during an online presentation?
Okay, so this is a good one. I'll start with the things not to do. Okay, keeping in mind, this is our box, right? This is our screen. Okay, so we don't want to do things like this because that's no longer relevant. We're out of our screen. So we want to keep our hand movements where they're relevant, right here. If we're fiddling too much, keep them down. And you don't want them in front of your face, right? You don't want to do this. You don't want to wave too fast or move things too much, okay? Fast movements blur. Molly just waved at me. You don't want to do that either. If you're watching on an iPad, and you can always tell when people are going to log out because they do that towards the screen. It looks horrible. So, and it's also important not to point. It works when you're having a person-to-person conversation, but if you're pointing at a screen or presenting in front of a crowd, pointing looks really accusative. So if I'm saying you can make an impact, an open hand gesture is as impactful, but more inviting than pointing. So for the most part though, body language should be natural, which is why I don't dwell on it too much, because everybody's different, right? You can't tell an Italian to not move their hands or they can't speak. Just like if somebody is normally very reserved, you can't tell them put that in or it'll look fake. So keep it natural, but keep, like, you know, the hand motions kind of right here, not in front of your face, not too big, and not too busy. That's the main thing.
I think this next question is something that we all think about, is what is the optimal length for an online presentation?
That totally depends on the situation and the content. So I don't know. I mean, I've listened to quite a few that are 10 to 20 minutes, and you can pack in a lot of information in that. Many are an hour. The important part is, if you're the only presenter for the whole time, is to add interaction every 15 minutes. And then it doesn't matter if it's 15 minutes or 1 hour, as long as people are interacting, it changes gears in our brains. And we don't have to, we're not just listening and seeing the same thing. Like, oh, it's time for a poll, and then we can do that. Or it's time for Q&A. And so for an online presentation, it's very helpful if the messaging is very segmented. Maybe the first 10 minutes, we're going to talk about this, and then we'll have Q&A. And then the next 15 minutes, we're going to talk about this, and then we'll have some interaction. And then and build into breaks. If it's going to go really long, more than an hour. I mean, I was at a webinar that was 2 hours, and they built in a break, about 4 or 5 minutes for people to go to the bathroom, grab a cup of tea, and come back. And so I guess it's just to feel like if you were in a conference room, you would naturally have a break after an hour. So you should do it for online. And if you were in a conference room, you would normally want to have Q&A or some sort of a discussion every 15 or 20 minutes. So it's just a matter of making sure you build it in.
Okay, let's do 2 more questions. I think this is a really good one. What other tools do you use to provide clarity or encourage interaction? For instance, like Jamboard?
I don't use that, but I know a lot of people, there's so many tools out there. I think it depends on your industry and what you're working on. So if it's something where you really want people to be collaborative and creative, that's a different tool than if you like, okay, edit this document, or we now need to work on this together. So it's hard to say. There's so many tools out there. Clarity, encourage interaction. I mean, depending on, and it also depends on the size of the group. Mm-hmm. But if you're talking about clarity of message, like, you know, asking questions and developing ideas together, that almost requires people to just have time to discuss. There's one that I like to do, and we can do it at the end here when we're done with questions, it's called throw the ball. So would say, assign somebody and say, okay, whoever, Joni or Jerry, I'm throwing the virtual ball to you. Tell us what was your biggest learning today. And then you would say that. And then you would pick somebody else and throw the virtual ball to them, and they unmute and say it. So it provides some built-in interaction at the end where people can say, this was interesting, or this was something new to me.
Well, so Dana, let's do that, because one of the questions was, what if I was meeting a friend today or tomorrow, what is one tip that you would give? So let's do that. Just really, let's do that now and as a close, and then I'll do a wrap.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So if you met a friend tomorrow and gave them a tip, what would it be? Jerry Wiseman on the East Coast, would you go first?
did I know that would be me? But I think having your message first and then doing your slides, speaking and practicing watching the camera is probably the two big things that I would take away from this.
Okay, thank you. So pick a name from this.
I will throw the ball at Shannon.
Okay, Shannon.
Yeah, so
wherever you are. Okay.
My big learning, in addition to the looking at the camera, was to remember to smile. That was a great one. Thank you.
You're welcome. Shannon, throw the ball.
I'll throw the ball to Molly Shore.
Yes, my main learning, other than what Jerry said, was to keep things in short sentences and short, clear segments.
Okay, thanks, Molly. Well, if people are comfortable, we wonder if we could see your video. If you're in your pajamas, I promise there's no judgment. But if you're in the middle of making dinner or something, or you've taken your clothes
fun
for the day, you don't have to. So, okay, Molly, could you throw the ball to someone?
Throwing the ball to Allison Shaw.
Hi, I actually liked the tip about sitting on the front half of your chair, because I've struggled with, I get my frame beautifully set and then I tend to move within it and slump. So that was great.
Okay, thanks, Allison. Allison, throw the virtual ball to someone else.
Oh, I will throw it to Joni from Rev 11. So you're the only one I can see in the sunshine, the name.
Oh, good. I loved your first tip about mindset, and there's just no limits and no apologies. Like like what you said, if you're in your pajamas, who cares? I mean, one thing that's so important about today, even versus like 2 months ago, is to be authentic. And people are showing up in all types of clothing and their hair done and cooking and outside. And I think that mindset and having no apologies is really important. I'm going to throw that to Lisa Kleiman. If she's still here. Is she still here?
Oh, a few people have dropped off. They must be.
Oh, she's there. She's muted.
Lisa, your mic's off.
Here I am speaking away and then might unmute. Okay, so there's one thing. Make sure you've got your technology working before you get started. But thank you, Dana. You've given a lot of really great tips about public speaking. And I really liked your analogy about giving the gift. I thought that was fantastic. It's a great reminder of things to think about. I think people tend to forget about. It's actually a message that they hopefully want to pass on and have that passion. So that's a nice way to look at that. And of course, it's always good to know who that audience is and try to target your message as best as possible to that audience, and that there are people on the other side. So real people tend to forget that. But anyway, thank you again, great tips. And so I will pass that on. Let's see, Simone.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I think to piggyback on that, really love the notion of your presentation and your thoughts and what you bring to the table being the gift. But I also really liked the idea of preparing your thoughts and organizing that with the sticky notes. Trying to avoid technology as often as we can, I think is healthy at this point. But writing things down and having to scratch them out and reformat is also not always super efficient. So I really think that I'm going to take that with me insofar as organizing my ideas moving forward. So thank you, Dana.
You're welcome, Simone.
I think that's a great place to stop. And I think that is so fun, Dana, to be able to do that. And it certainly engages the group. And I really appreciate everyone who spoke to share what they learned today. Dana, I can't thank you enough. This has been so helpful for me. I mean, we just pivoted. Speaking of experience, we just pivoted, 2 months ago to online from having only on or in-person events. And so this learning curve of talking into the camera, for instance, is a big one. So I just appreciate all your tips today, and thank you. I'd